Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this Techstrong learning experience brought to you by Tigera and AWS. My name is Cody, and thank you for joining us today. We have an exciting panel ahead, but before we dive into things, I have just a couple of notes I'd like to review with everyone. First of all, we are recording today's session, so if you happen to miss any of our discussion, if you'd like to watch again at a later point in time, or if you'd like to share this conversation with your team, you will be receiving the recording via email shortly after we conclude this live session today. Now, if you would like to get involved, there are a couple of ways to do so. The first option is to use the chat tab on the right side of your screen, and that's where you can send in your thoughts, comments, and speak with your fellow audience members. If you have any specific questions for our speakers, you can direct those to the Q&A tab on the right side of that chat section. Additionally, if you jump to the handout section, there are a couple of resources there for you, so feel free to grab those. And we will be selecting two of our most engaged attendees today to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So be sure to participate in the chat, in the Q&A, and of course, fill out our post-webinar survey. So our topic today is how Boundless software accelerated customer onboarding with Calico Cloud and Amazon EKS. I'm joined today by Diraj Segal, Director of Partner Solution Engineering at Tigera, Gokul Srinivasan, Senior Partner Solution Architect at AWS, and Romil Khanna, Founder and CEO at Boundless. So Diraj, Gokul, and Romil, thank you all so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. Diraj, do you want to dive us right into things?
Sure. Thank you, Cody. Thank you so much for welcoming us. Everyone, thank you for joining us today for this Techstrong webinar. And with me, I have Romil and Gokul. So let's get started as we have just 1 hour or less. So a few housekeeping items. Feel free to put your question and answers within the uh, in the chat panel, and we will be answering those questions as we will be going through it. And if you have any specific question for Romel or Google or me, feel free to ask it in the chat window, and we will get to it. The next thing, what we are looking at is also there is a, a link to the entire case study which we are going to talk about, like how the what entire journey of Boundless with respect to using the EKS and the Calico to make the solution, which we are going to talk about. So let's hear from Romel here. So, Romel, can you tell a little bit about yourself, your roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So my focus is primarily in the ops space, so DevOps, Cloud Ops, basically anything to help businesses run. And the primary problems that I try to solve are around costing, scaling, compliance, and security, both for service workloads and for data. So more of a holistic approach to operations rather than silos of information.
So, what do you do at Boundless Software? I know you are the founder, but can you tell a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So actually, we started Boundless with an aim to democratize enterprise cloud features. So we wanted to make them available in a way that they'd be cost efficient for all businesses of every size, without having to compromise on either scale or compliance or security due to like cost reasons or complexity or like the operational overhead. To that end, actually, we decided that the best way to do this would be to build our own, what we called a cloud orchestrator, and we've named it Switchblade. And what it basically allows you to do is it works similar to a Kubernetes operator would for services. However, it's for cloud resources. So you get the benefit of having that simple YAML interface that you get with Kubernetes without having the complexity of having to write Ansible code or Terraform code or Pulumi code. So basically, you just write the YAML you want, apply it, and then we will handle creating, updating, deleting, importing existing stuff, all of that. And then to stay true to our vision, of bringing these enterprise features closer. We're also working on adding AI into Switchblade, where if you want to imagine the whole paradigm of shift left. So if you're building, like, for example, an RDS instance, and you decide that it's going to have public visibility, you're not going to have a backup, your password is like 5 characters wrong, it will basically look at what you're trying to create and say, like, hey, you're violating this compliance requirement in whatever you have chosen to adopt. So ultimately, it's to save everyone tons of time, so that rather than writing code, they can just get on to doing what they're needing to do. And then, redefining what day two operations look like. So rather than, using a lot of day two operations tools to patch up design flaws or, shore up previous oversight, it's more about optimizing, realizing how we can make things better, and then continuous monitoring for the present requirements and future requirements, like through the use of Calico and other things.
Got it. Thank you, Rommel. So with Rommel, we also have Gokul. So Gokul, would you like to tell a little bit about yourself and your role and responsibilities in AWS?
Sure, Dheeraj. Hi, everyone. I'm Gokul Srinivasan. I'm a senior partner solution architect with AWS. And what it means is I help our global startups to co-develop and support the go-to-marketing and help them grow their business along with AWS. So been with AWS for a little more than 2 years, but been in the industry for almost for the past 2 decades. Thanks for having me here, Romil and Dheeraj.
No worries. Can you tell us a little bit about the latest or some cool stuff which is happening in the EKS side of the world? Anything you have heard from AWS reInvent also?
Yeah, totally, Dheeraj. I think one of the biggest thing that is getting prominent with EKS, a lot of folks who have joined and participated in the reInvent might have heard about it. It is around the EKS add-ons that really supports the third-party services that build on top of EKS to add on their features and capability. So that way, when they promote it's all about the customers within AWS. So when we look at from the end customer perspective, we do not want them to have two different experience, one on the AWS side and other on the partner side. We want to provide them a seamless experience. So the EKS add-on is one good latest advanced solution that's been launched that provides that seamless experience for the end customer, where the ISV partners such as Tigera can embed their solution within the EKS as an EKS add-on. So that way, when the end customer sees everything as a single pane of glass, providing a seamless experience. So where the partners and AWS can work hand in hand. So that is essentially one thing that I would like to call out. And the other aspect that's getting a lot of prominence is all around the generative AI and the machine learning technology. So more customers are adopting generative AI, and it's just not a standalone application. They want to integrate and run on their EKS cluster. So a lot of innovation and a lot of process improvements are happening in that area. Just like to call out that as one of the unique aspect.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. And Romil, you brought in an interesting aspect about you simplifying the overall DevOps process. Can you give a little bit of background about how Boundless standardized on the Kubernetes and very specifically the EKS?
Yeah. So it became pretty much a natural evolution, actually. Like probably everybody else, we started with Elastic Beanstalk a while ago when Docker first became popular. Eventually, we went on to ECS before we landed on Kubernetes, and I really think it was around like 2018. I was looking for ways to get it going in production. Initially, what I did was I started just vanilla install, force of habit of being a platform engineer, trying to do everything myself. And it was very overwhelming, and it was very difficult to set up. And then we also tried RKE, same things, very, very hard. And afterwards, I did some evaluation, and I was like, okay, my initial thoughts around EKS was like, okay, I don't want to pay a fixed cost for the control plane and all of that. But when I really looked down at it, I mean, it's like $75 a month, and me spending even an hour on it, I've already wasted more money than it would cost me. So when I started thinking about it from like the cost benefit perspective, it was like very obvious. Like just use EKS. Like it's use it, get going. Um, so that's how we landed on EKS itself. I think like after we standardized on EKS and Kubernetes, it was pretty much paved the way for everything else that we do now.
So, quick question there, Roma. Like, can you tell us a little bit about the deployment size, something about the clusters, how many clusters you have, how many regions?
Yeah. So we're on every continent, and I think we're sitting at about 20 clusters right now, 20, possibly even 30, and it's a mix of environments. Some operate entirely privately. Some are doing public-facing jobs. Some are data jobs, and I think we're well over 200 workloads from like user-defined workloads. So quite a bit of diversity in the implementations and quite a bit of diversity in the scale. But the requirements fundamentally are basically the same. Everybody wants a stable platform that can scale, that can handle their compliance needs, handle their security needs. It's just a matter of everybody wants to be able to sleep at night.
Got it. Yes, you're absolutely right. So, in regards to I know like EKS is one of the major part of the Boundless software, but what are the other different services you use from AWS?
Oh, quite a lot. So we use all the caches, Memcache, Redis, the in-memory Redis, the one that just happened, using DynamoDB, S3, SQS, SNS, Cognito,
Wow.
Glue. It's all over the place. Redshift. We're using Bedrock now. So a very large variety of services. I think the only area that we haven't like properly utilized, which is still on our to-do list, is like the IoT part. We use the data store and the data management portion of it, but not the rest, only because we haven't had a use case yet. But yeah, I think on AWS we've touched everything.
Yeah, that's what I can sense it. So, like as you have built your software, like and you standardize on EKS, lastly, like how did Calico become a part of Boundless in this entire process?
Yeah, it came mostly out of needing a solution for compliance and security. So I had worked on a project, and it was for onboarding SOC 2 and HIPAA and GDPR, pretty much all at the same time. And all compliances in terms of like network security essentially just boil down to like 5 things. It's logging and alerting. Ideally, you have some sort of SIEM with like anomaly detection, auditing capabilities, firewalling. So either having a firewall at the edge or having independent firewalls for a workload, some sort of vulnerability assessment tool, and network observability. So what I found was if you have like a very large cluster or a distributed network of clusters, there's probably less than 10 tools on the market, right? Now, when I want a tool that does all 5 of the things that I said and do them efficiently without breaking the bank, the list goes down to like 3 to 5. So less than half, right? There's not that many that can handle container level security. They run inside a cluster, they work with a service mesh, and they don't cost a crazy amount. So beyond like the features and the cost that went into picking Calico, it also fit into our existing tool chain quite well. So we've been able to develop a lot of automation through Switchblade. So we're not only able to just install, but also configure and then monitor Calico on the fly. So that allows us to basically, see drift in real time. And, for a security product, you want to be able to tell if some security policy that you installed hasn't been tampered with by somebody else, or, some configuration has intrinsically changed due to an update or something. So, and that level of integration was only possible because of the way fundamentally how the Calico installer is and how it's set up inside Kubernetes, just using regular custom resources. So took a while to understand the plumbing, but once we were able to hook into it, it's become our tool of choice. And
got it. So what was the tipping point for Calico, right? Like compliance, I know, but anytime you're doing anything, it's compliance. But what was the tipping point?
The tipping point was the aggregation of tools, really. Being able to, not have to manage different tools for the items that I said, not needing a SIEM tool, a separate firewall, a separate vulnerability manager. That really made it much more straightforward and easier to put it at the top of the list, because learning one tool is significantly easier than learning 3 or 5.
Yes.
Right, and that's before you even have to think about the maintenance overhead of managing 3 or 5 different tools.
Yeah, got it. So let's go to a little bit more about like the so what were the business drivers and technical pain points that led your organization to consider implementing Calico?
Yeah. So technical pain points, there weren't that many. The team's quite skilled. They have significant experience with the platforms that they've been working on. But quite a lot of business drivers. But essentially, I boiled them down to just 3 things, right? Cost effectiveness, the speed of implementation, and low maintenance. And for Calico, that basically fit the bill almost exactly, right? So our stack is already fixed. Like I mentioned, we standardize on Kubernetes and everything. So the amount of options were already limited. So Calico fitting into that was pretty natural. Addressing all of those pain points, it's pretty straightforward in a sense that if I was to say my list in reverse, for example, like Calico is already quite stable. There's not much maintenance to do to begin with, right? The occasional release comes out. You can apply it manually because it's just a YAML. Most of the time there's nothing to do, right? So all the maintenance work really comes from the configuration side of things, like configuring the logging, configuring the policies, configuring the thread feeds, and then the overall observability and alerting system of it, right? We can simplify this quite a lot by doing it using infrastructure as code, right? So you can apply it using Terraform or Gloomy, so on, right? But and then when we bring it into Switchblade, it becomes absolutely trivial, right? So it goes from like many lines to like a Boolean flag. So in that sense, the low maintenance became even lower maintenance, right? And then the installation is really similar. There's only 2 things to get going with Calico, right? There you install the CRD, and then you just install the actual resource. So it's just two files, very, very simple. So overall, when you get into it, like I said, to understand the plumbing, It
Mm-hmm.
takes a few months to get comfortable, and then you can use infrastructure as code to roll out quicker and then manage things quicker, right? But and then so instead of taking a few months, we figured like maybe we can make it minutes or hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we started looking at how to bring it into Switchblade so that it can be kind of like a central console where it's like you not only deploy your surrounding infrastructure but also the inside of your
Mm-hmm.
cluster. Um, and then the last bit, like I said, was the cost effectiveness around the logging, auditing, firewall, right? So in terms of just raw features, the business drivers are like, if you look at it on paper, you don't have to buy a SIEM, you don't have to buy a vulnerability assessment software, you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to buy a firewall,
Mm-hmm.
right? And these things, they get expensive. They get very, very expensive, right? A good SIEM, if you want to have it the same way Calico has it and you want to control everything in-house,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at maybe $60,000 to $80,000 in licensing fees,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you think about a firewall, it's like $1,500, $12,000 a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a vulnerability assessment tool. That's like maybe $10,000, $15,000 a year as well, right? So by the time you're in, you're like 80, 90,000, right? Not to
Yeah.
mention the three people that everybody has: an architect, a platform engineer, and a DevOps person, right? So the total cost ends up being like $500,000 a year just
Yeah.
to do these things. Uh, so you can see that for a startup, it's not easy. You can't just be like, okay, let's do it now, right? So
Yeah.
it becomes very, very straightforward in terms of like a pitch of like why to use Calico, right? You can reduce it down. One tool costs maybe 25% of the aggregate cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get the tool from Switchblade, your ROI on just not having to write code. If you want to imagine if a typical engineer is spending 25 to 40% of their time writing code, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the value of that's a lot, right? It's much more than what you would pay for a simple license for something that just does it for you. When you combine all those things, it becomes very a potent pitch on why you should use it and and the features by themselves, like they speak for themselves, right? So I've never had trouble going through an audit using just the Calico dashboard even to present evidence.
Got it. Got it.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems like the cost piece you're talking about when you look from any startup which is trying to break through into the enterprises which deal in the compliance side of the world
Yeah.
significantly helps with respect to how you can get going
Yeah.
and you can bring all this package together. So I think so you're already answering some of my points on the like how did Calico address the identified pain points. So,
Yeah.
if you want to add more, let me. We are more than willing to hear. So continue on your thought with respect to it.
Yeah. Well, I do want to share, I think,
Mm-hmm.
the overall impact of Calico.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was mentioned, the primary goal has been around security and compliance and being able to handle the network security side of it.
Mm-hmm.
With Switchblade, we're trying to do the operational side of it. So you can combine the two, you get more of a holistic view.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other question when it comes to like installing any form of security tool is what is it going to do to your infrastructure, right? So there's a cost to adding security software, not just the material dollar cost, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a performance cost and there's interoperability cost. So if you're using, for example, a firewall, you want to make sure that the analysis that that firewall has built into it doesn't impact latency on your customers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you also want to make sure that your firewall can manage to stay up to date on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of things are also very easy with Calico to do through the use of managed threat feeds
Mm-hmm.
and through using basically a sidecar pattern with a service mesh like Istio, for example. So that's kind of the way we install Calico firewall. We work a lot with Istio, and rather than having a firewall solution that sits far away from your ingress, we actually decided to work with the engineering team at Calico, and we figured out how to roll it into the ingress. So our overall footprint in terms of latency, we only see like a 2 to 3 millisecond increase in overall latency versus 20 or 30 if it was having to go to even a different node in the same cluster where the firewall would be. The other benefit is because of this pattern, the firewall isn't a single point of failure anymore, right? Because it's part of the ingress, so it scales with the ingress.
Nice. So I think so. I have a couple of questions which have come here, and I love seeing like the audience is asking. So the first question they're asking is Boundless tightly integrated with the AWS service only, or what if customers want to use alternative clouds such as GCP and Kubernetes?
Yeah.
I know Google does not like that question, but it's a multi-cloud environment, so we should answer
Yeah.
what customers are saying.
Yeah, so we work with all clouds. We're not exclusive. EKS is just where we began. So we're most mature, but by no means exclusive to that. And similarly with Calico, I know with GKE, there's some nuance, but overall, it's cloud agnostic. So both Switchblade and Calico both are cloud agnostic, and we have no issues working with either side. In fact, we've worked exclusively on other clouds, and we've also set up interoperability between them. So there's been a project where we've used the compute power on AWS combined with the BigQuery and AI engine on GCP, for example, right? To kind of leverage the best of both worlds. Right now, we're also looking at a project where we've got workloads in AWS, and we're working on GPT-4 in Azure, and then we're mixing those results with actually Titan in Bedrock, and then combining them to do some work. It's more on the code completion side, trying to figure out, like I was saying earlier, about security policies and being able to figure out where you have drift and those kind of compliance issues. So, sometimes everybody's moving very quickly, and we believe, just pick the right tool for the job as long as it's fast.
Got it. Thanks. And the next one is it's a little bit tricky one, but I think so it's spot on, and love to see these type of questions come. What is the biggest technical challenge you faced when implementing Calico Cloud and Amazon EKS?
So I'll tell you the first time that I did it, I ran the installer and nothing happened. And it was very hard to debug, but actually the Calico support team is extremely responsive. They were able to quickly help me figure out how to debug and get going again. The second biggest thing has been uninstallation, and that's actually something that we've been working actively with the Calico team, their engineering side, on how to effectively clean up. It's one of those things where you might do some maintenance and then you realize that you want to make some changes or you want to roll back, and sometimes the easiest solution is to just wipe and restart. So those kind of things initially were the biggest challenges that we had to work through. The least challenging portion has been upgrades. So thankfully, ongoing, once you are going, is very straightforward.
Nice. Okay. Thanks, Romal. And to the folks who are listening to the webinar, please feel free to put more questions. We would love to answer most of them. Okay, there is another one. How can Calico Cloud and Amazon EKS assist business in reaching SOC 2 compliance while building out scalable architecture?
That's a good one because that's exactly what we do. um, Calico helps on the network security side. It basically helps you solve the compliance requirements that have to do with data security, data and network security in terms of vulnerability assessment, instead in terms of threat assessment and things like that. The scalable infrastructure part comes from our own technical expertise in EKS to design clusters through our experience of working in multiple startup areas and larger enterprise areas on how to isolate workloads, how to isolate groups of workloads, and setting up tool chains and policies so that they can work independent of each other, but still as part of a whole system. So the goal is always being able to infinitely scale, but still not have what do you call it? High coupling. So we decide to scale in a loosely coupled way so that it's very easy for you to change and it's easy for you to scale up while maintaining reliability and resiliency, which is also another more of the tenets inside SOC 2 that we achieve.
Got it. So one thing I would like to say about the SOC 2 compliance is like Calico, many of our customers work in the industry where they need to be PCI compliant, SOC 2 compliant,
Yeah.
GDPR. And we have specific playbooks with respect to all these compliance initiatives. So if you go on our website, there are like the entire mapping of the SOC 2 requirements with respect to the implementation, enforcement, and also the evidence reporting, that is audit. And literally you can see the spec number and then how will Calico work and how it will be able to basically make your compliance. It has been many other customers of ours whose success stories are also posted there. You'll see it in that portal itself, and I'll put a link here also for the folks to go and research on that one. Another thing is every 2 weeks or so we run specific workshops on the compliance piece, right, which basically goes through this journey. And I will say Amazon, AWS is one of those partners of ours, which basically co-hosts these type of immersion workshops with us. So our Dev Days workshop. So feel free to join us. It's a 1.5 hour workshop uh, led by the person, the actual real person, and we give you a shared cluster and we give the script, everything, so you can basically get comfortable. With that, I could have gone to the next question, but now I see more questions coming in. This is from Gene, and I think so. There are two questions together. What are the lock-in features I should avoid if it is needed to get back to the native management? Please provide in-depth details. So, Gene, one thing I can say is we don't follow the philosophy of Hotel California. So, you should be able to, because there is an open source project of Calico. So if you go native, you can use the project Calico features and then build on top of it. Many of our customers, our big scale of deployments, are also on that piece. So with that, Romal, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's exactly what you mentioned, but I think it applies in more for a broader term. If you're looking to avoid lock-in, I think the primary consideration you want to make is should you go open source or should you go managed, right? And ideally, if you're going managed, you want to pick a technology that's available on all the platforms so you can lift and shift as you need. So there's it's a decision you have to make based on your own requirements, right? So, for example, like if you want a Postgres database, everybody has one. You can also do an open source one, right? But looking at what you want to do with the database, what features you're looking for, and who makes it easy, it's really a build versus buy conversation at that point. In terms of hard lock-in, I tend to avoid features that are exclusive, that are not portable, which is also one of the reasons why we are standard on Kubernetes, because it provides us an agnostic way of deploying and operating. So that's one of the things that I would suggest on managing lock-in.
Got it. The last one, which for now we have, is what other products have you researched before Calico?
Oh man, um, quite a lot actually. So I think the top three I can remember right off the top of my head is Cilium, CrowdStrike, Lacework, um, and then on basically those are the ones that are more directly comparable. Where I was saying, like, not everybody has all the features, right? Um, but and then outside of that, if you want to look piecemeal, right? I've looked at just the AWS WAF combined with CloudTrail, combined with Security Hub, combined with ECR image scans. Um, so it can become quite daunting to manage all of it together. I've looked at Sneak, Dependabot, looked at what else? I can't think of any more, but no, we've evaluated quite a bit. I think it's it's been an ever-changing landscape,
Mm-hmm.
right? Every time I look, there's like five more providers, and really everybody's tackling a niche, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's just doing one thing. They want to do one thing. They want to do it very well. Either it's easier for them to do it, or it's easier for them to sell it. But if you're looking for something entirely holistic, I think if you look on like G2 or something and look for equivalents of Calico, there really are only like three or four. Um, so, and yeah, I've looked at all of those ones that I mentioned.
Got it. Another one, I think so. This is continuing conversation now, which is good. Let's say I have a bunch of Terraform cores. How do I move forward with much ease and less effort leveraging actual written codes? I don't know.
Yeah. Um, so actually, our operator is able to directly import the state of a resource without looking at your code. So it looks at the deployed resource and its configuration, and you're able to import it. So, for example, if you have, I'm going to take a simple example. If you have an IAM role, right, you can import it based on the ARN,
Mm-hmm.
and it would go and find the role, find the policies, and all of that stuff, and self-populate the YAML inside your cluster and update it, and then save it into a state file. And from that point forward, you just grab that YAML and update it and move forward with it. You don't need to continue with the Terraform code anymore.
Got it. The next question is more for Boundless itself. I'm glad that's not a question now. While Boundless software offers cloud ops and DevOps services, will AI ops services be offered or possibly offered?
Yeah, so it's funny. This is a relatively new term, and we've come to realize that we've been doing AI ops for the entire time,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of companies that we work with in the AI space, and we help them develop their models. We help them deploy their models, scale them, secure them, all of that. So we've already been doing this before it was a thing.
Mhm.
So for us, we kind of just, I guess we're looking at it a little bit more lower level or higher level, if you want to say. For us, it's just infrastructure operations, regardless of what your industry is, and ultimately having that standardized base is what helps us do it. So regardless of what kind of company you are, we're able to scale you, secure you, and help you comply. Everything else is, nuance.
Got it. Got it. Um, we don't have more questions right now from the public, so let's go back to our talk track. So as you were talking about the performance cost, right, and we
Yeah.
did the firewall analysis, right? I think so. The second cost which you wanted to bring out was the maintenance cost. I think so. Any commentary on that one?
Yeah. So it's maintenance cost is one of those, very difficult to measure things, right? What is it really costing you if every request takes 100 milliseconds longer,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're a tiny company, probably not much. If you're a giant company, well, take those hundreds of milliseconds and look at the node hours wasted,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you once you start looking at the node hours wasted, you're seeing real dollars at that point,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, this is the part where the AI companies, I think, need to pay the most attention, right? Um, because you deploy a high performance machine, right? Maybe that machine has like 50 GPUs. It's costing you like $60 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Every extra minute that you spend, right, it adds up.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, it might not feel like much because you have a good profitable business and all of that. But when you really want to scale, when somebody says, "Okay, I'm going to have millions of users and everything," the paradigm changes entirely, right? And the cost structures in the front and the back completely change as well. And then, not to mention on the overhead side, right? Your ops team is going to see different form of challenges, right? Scaling outwards to millions of requests looks very different than scaling upwards from like 2 cores to 20 cores, right? It's just more like a conversation like, what do your operations look like when you need to go from 2 cores to 2,000 cores,
Mm-hmm.
right? So is your firewall going to scale to accommodate all of that? What happens when availability zones go down? What happens to your cost across all those availability zones, right? Because primarily that's one of the hidden costs of EC2, right? You can have all these resilient deployments, but across availability zones, there's a cost to both ingress and egress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so being able to evaluate those challenges and then map them back to real dollars is where I see maintenance as being a key portion on how you deploy systems and how you deploy a security solution, right? It might sound nice that you want to evaluate every single workload with its own independent firewall and policy, right? Um, it just might not be the most cost efficient thing to do. So you have to what's the word for it? Chaos engineer. You have to chaos engineer it. What happens when I have too many users? What happens when I have too many requests? What happens, anything. And see how, get down to the real dollars and cents of it. And what we found is that um, with the way we design things, the way that we build things, trying to architect it correctly to begin with. I think that's something I said in the very beginning, like, simplifying day two operations, because we really feel that day two operations should be more about monitoring and optimizing and not fixing, right? You should do things correctly if you architect them correctly. So combining that with a low footprint tool like Calico is what's made it so that a 2-person ops team is able to support a 500-man business
Got it.
with like operations around the globe, right? Only because there's a high degree of autonomy in the system and a high degree of free hand, so to say.
Got it. Got it. Um, so moving on, Romal, as we are also coming towards the
Yeah.
last part of the hour, um, so let's start with like, did you achieve the desired results after implementing Calico? Right? Can you share specific outcomes or metrics? metrics?
Yeah, so the metric that I did share was in terms of latency, right? My goal from a security product is that my system doesn't go down trying to secure it. Um, so that was one. It was a big one actually, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but the overall reason for having Calico was to solve compliance issues. And I think I mentioned, like, to date, I have not had an issue or complaint from anybody, nor has my team, where we submit evidence for an audit using the Calico dashboard, or even like our own Kubernetes outputs from Calico.
Got it. Got it. Another question from the audience. This is more for Boundless service. Is it easier to migrate from existing Kubernetes clusters to Boundless service? Does it follow the standards of Kubernetes?
The short answer is that it depends. And the depends is how far away is your existing implementation from, the well-architected practices. So I think AWS has a very strong document. I think it's like 100 pages plus on like well-architected cloud presence. And so we use that as like our blueprint on how to do things. And the farther you are away from it, it's harder it is to migrate. Not to say that, it's impossibly harder, right? We're talking maybe months instead of weeks, that kind of thing. But it's never like just completely impossible where you have to throw out what you have.
Got it. With that, I will say it's almost a last question, and Google, feel free to ask any question you have on your mind. Any additional points or insight you would like to share your experience with Calico? Rumal, this question is for you.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was for Gokul.
Yeah, I was saying Gokul can also ask question, which he has.
Okay. Sorry, could you repeat? I was actually reading John's question.
Okay. Yeah, that we are going to come to that question also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, would you mind repeating? Sorry.
Yeah, the question was like any additional insights with respect to experience with Calico.
There are a few more things that we are collaborating on. I know my team is actively working with the Calico engineering team to bring even more features into Calico, so that businesses can see even more savings. So it's more of a to be continued situation. But so far, I think that's where we are today is pretty ideal.
Got it. Okay, now let's go to the Q&A. The new one which was asked. Why in the business model only 4 clusters are provided with the advanced while unlimited with Switchblade Enterprise?
Yeah, I can answer that.
Yeah.
Very simple answer to that. I mean, we had to pick a tiering system. So we basically went basic, advanced, enterprise, where enterprise is, unlimited customizability, and advanced is what most people would be suited to if they're running various workloads. Now, 4 versus unlimited, our general guideline is that you basically have a control cluster where you install Switchblade, and in that control cluster you use to deploy your other clusters. And so in the standard case, you have a developing cluster, you have a test cluster, and you have a production cluster, right? So overall, when you combine it, you get 4 clusters. If you find the need, you want more, there's ways to incrementally scale up the license so you can have more. Feel free to reach out to us on sales. We'll definitely get somebody to help you figure something out that makes sense for you. And then on the enterprise integration side, effectively we're able to integrate Switchblade to manage any form of resource on the cloud so long as it has an API. So I think your question about ServiceNow, yeah, we can do it. We're prioritizing native cloud resources at the moment. However, if you decide to go down the enterprise route, we can build it specifically for your needs.
Got it. Thank you. Let me see if there are any questions, because I don't have any more questions. So thank you so much. Thank you, Romal. Thank you so much for sharing this information. It has been a wonderful one, and I think so it has a lot of learnings, which I think so we will internally in Tigera take back and look into. So, and thank you, Gokul. Thank you so much for co-hosting this webinar with us. Cody, back to you.
Wonderful. Well, Diraj, thank you, and Gokul, Romil, thank you both for joining us here on Techstrong Learning as well. It's been such a pleasure having you with us over this last hour.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Will the recording and the transcript and the things will be available to the attendees or the people who have even registered?
Absolutely. So we will be sending out this recording as soon as it becomes available, and you'll be receiving that via email, the one that you registered with today.
Okay. And if you have any specific question for Boundless, you guys know about it. Just go to the Boundless software website, contact Roman and his team, and he should be able to help you on that side. If you have any questions with respect to the Calico piece, feel free to reach out to us through our website or through our chatbot, which is on the website. So and we will be more than happy to answer. I have shared some of the collateral. There are workshops, so feel free to attend them. That they also give you hands-on experience rather than more of salesy thing, but you will learn, as what Romal said, exactly the way it is, and in the specific EKS environment, because that is the AWS Dev Days workshops, which we run together quite a bit. Other than that, I think so that's pretty much we have for the day.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you guys. Really, really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Romal. Thank you, Gogo. Have a good day. Have a good day, everyone.
See you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So we will be contacting 2 of our most engaged attendees to receive a $50 Amazon gift card. So thank you for your participation today. I'd like to thank Tigera and AWS for sponsoring our program. And thank you so much for attending, everyone. We appreciate your time. And there is a brief survey in the handouts as well as pinned to the top of the chat. If you'd like to fill that out for us, we would love to hear your feedback. Otherwise, we hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and you may now disconnect.
Thanks.
Thank you.